Hello, my name's Rob, part of the clergy team here in Portishead. Welcome to our thought for this week. 14th of December, when this thought is due to go out, is recognised by the Church as the feast of St. John of the Cross, the day when we remember the 16th century Spanish mystic who's become known as John of the Cross. And so we're going to think a little bit about him this morning. He was, as I've said, Spanish, and he was alive during the 16th century. And he was a monk, and he joined the Carmelite order, which was an order that had been set up to be quite strict, with quite strong rules about how monks and nuns should behave. But as so often happened with those orders, when people died, they left money so that the monks might pray for their souls after they died, and slowly the Carmelite order became quite rich, and that meant that the monks and the nuns stopped obeying the rules, following the rules quite as closely as they had. And so when John of the Cross joined the Carmelites, he was rather shocked to find how lax, how flabby they'd become, and he was thinking that he might leave. But his friend, another Carmelite nun called Teresa of Avila, persuaded him to stay, and they set about trying to reform the order, to remind the monks and the nuns of the rules that they should follow, and how they should follow those, and through that become close to God. But both of them found quite a lot of opposition from those within the order, and John was imprisoned. And this was one of two periods in his life when he was really treated very harshly indeed. The other was in the time just leading up to his death. And he became very depressed, very downcast, and he comforted himself by writing poetry, really very beautiful poetry, expressing something very deep about how it is that we draw close to God. And much of his poetry centered on the cross, which is why he's become known as John of the Cross. I'm going to read not one of his poems, I'm going to read a passage of scripture which I think resonates well with who he was and what he was trying to say. And this comes from Matthew chapter 16, verses 24 to 26. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me." The thing that John of the Cross has become best known for is coining the phrase, the dark night of the soul. And during his time of imprisonment, when he became very depressed, John came to realize that feeling far away from God was not an indication that God wasn't there or that God didn't exist. That this is part of the normal experience of the Christian life. In fact, for those of us who want to go deeper with God, we need to go through that experience of finding ourselves or feeling ourselves distant from God, of feeling down. That's quite a difficult thing to realize and to recognize, but it can also be hugely comforting, because it reminds us that how we feel is not the most important thing. The fact that I feel far from God does not mean that God is a long way away. It just means that I'm not feeling very much. And that can be affected by our mood in a whole range of ways. Now, of course, this is a time of year when we're just approaching Christmas. And Christmas is a time when we certainly feel that we ought to be feeling happy. It's a joyous celebration in the church's year. Why is it that now, today, I'm talking about John of the Cross and the dark night of the soul? Well, I think it resonates quite well with this season, actually, for two reasons. Firstly, because not everybody feels happy at Christmas time. Some of us associate this time with the loss of somebody that we love, and we find the fact that everybody around us seems to be having a lot of fun to make that even worse. In fact, I heard somebody say recently, somebody who had themselves experienced quite poor mental health, that they found Christmas difficult because it was a time when you're supposed to be happy, and that just made them feel even worse. They knew that they always find Christmas a difficult time of year. The second reason why I think this is an important thing to recognise at Christmas is that the circumstances of Jesus' birth were actually very difficult. I'm sure that Mary and Joseph, arriving in Bethlehem looking for a place to stay, despaired at God. God had blessed them with the gift of this child, and yet arriving in Bethlehem they had no place to stay, and everything looked pretty desperate. That reminds us that because things seemed desperate, it didn't mean God wasn't there. God was deeply and profoundly there when Jesus was born. But it didn't mean that it was always easy. The Christian life is not always easy. And sometimes we need to go through those periods of challenge and difficulty in order to really draw closer to God. And so, amidst the joy of this season, and I pray that it may be a joyful time for you, it's really good to remember that not everybody is joyful, to keep an eye out for those who are not. And if this applies to you this Christmas time, then please be assured of our prayers, and may you know God's deep and profound blessing, however it is that you need to know that this Christmas time. May God bless you.